Oh, wow. All right, guys, we are live. How you doing? I haven't streamed in a while. It's Jerome Parker, aka Master Shake, and welcome to Tech Talk. Today is May 29th, 2018. How's everyone doing? Today's Tech Talk is not going to be very long, but it's something that definitely needs to be discussed. Let me set this up. All right. It's definitely something that needs to be discussed, and that is progressive web apps versus native mobile apps in 2018. What's one versus the other? What are the pros and cons? And when does your business need one versus the other? Let me see if I can put this. I'm outside of my backyard, as you can see, and I'm using the iPad. Hopefully, yeah, that should be good. So, progressive web apps versus native mobile apps. When does your business need one? What is the difference? What are the pros and cons? So let's start off with definitions. So let's start off with native mobile apps. That's everyone knows what that is. Those are apps that you go to the Play Store, you go to the App Store, and you download an installable package onto your device, and it runs on the device locally. A progressive web app is a web app that implements native-like features such as offline functionality, background push notifications. You can add shortcuts to your home screen, and it'll open up as if it were a native app. And in the case of Android, which I'll dive into in a moment, will actually install an APK onto your device called a web APK. But basically, it has the full app experience. Let me show you. Can't really see it. So I have a folder here on my phone. It's called web apps, and these are apps that I've written or that I use, websites that I use very often. So let's pull up my torrent theater. You won't be. I don't know if you can read it or not, but when I tap this, it's going to open up like it's an app. You see that? It opens up like it's an app. This is a website. There's no URL toolbar. This is the menu bar right here. And everything is isolated and self-contained on this progressive web app. So let it be known, I have done both mobile development or I rather should say I do mobile development and I do web development. And I started off as a very strong mobile developer, and for a while I believed that mobile apps were the future. I mean, they still technically are, but I thought it wasn't really going to go past. I thought the web was done essentially. I thought everything was going to go to mobile apps. But then a lot of changes came with HTML5, including the progressive web app standard. And this standard allowed you to include a manifest.json file, which is a JSON file that instructs your browser how to handle this website as if it were an app. So you can give it things such as a logo, a splash screen. You have to have certain things like it has to implement offline first functionality. So the app has to work even if there's no internet, even if it's just displaying a page that says you must have internet in order to use this app. So in order to do that, you must use a web worker, a service worker that does background functionality and implements the fetch function, or event listener rather. So by supplying this JSON file and by having this web worker that allows you to implement offline first functionality, the browser knows how the browser can package this website as an app and put it on your home screen. Now there are limitations. The biggest one right now is the OS limitations. So you can install Progressive Web App on the desktop and it'll run like a desktop app across all major operating systems, no problem. But when you get to mobile, on Android, it's wonderful, it's beautiful. On Apple, they're very hostile to Progressive Web Apps. So with the latest iOS update, you can install. It listed some of the restrictions, but there's still a lot of stuff you can't do, like WebRTC. You can't do that on Apple. So a lot of the apps that use WebRTC can't use that. You still can't explicitly ask for permission for stuff like the microphone and the video camera and stuff like that. So that makes it very difficult. And until Apple solves that problem, you're pretty much SOL on that front. But regardless, you can't access contact information, or really, you can't access much device information. You can access the sensors. You can access like the accelerometer, the gyroscope, the GPS chip. You can access the camera, the microphone, but you can't read. You can't do background geolocation yet. There is a proposal to add background geolocation using web workers. Hopefully that will come out very soon, because that's really, I mean, I can talk, and I will talk about how background geolocation will make web apps. I think that will help push it over, because there's so many geolocation apps that we have, or a lot of apps depend on geolocation, rather, background geolocation, but that's another story. Yeah, so you can't do background geolocation. You can't, like I said, you can't read contact information, text messages, some of the advanced scanners, or not scanners, sensors that certain phones have. You can't access those. You can't do thumbprint recognition. You can't do on Apple, you can't do Bluetooth. On Android, you can. But as far as, like I said, you can do stuff like background push notifications. You can do caching. So, for example, let's say you write a Progressive Web App that's a news reader, right? So in the background, it's downloading the articles to the device, so that when you open up the app, it's reading the offline data first. So it's going to be reading the data from the database that was filled up in the background using the service worker. So that way, if you have no internet, you can still read the cache stories. And then when it's time to get new stories, you just fetch and then recache. Where was I? Oh yeah, so offline first functionality and whatnot. So these features, most apps, if you think about it, they're more or less the same. They're doing REST requests, HTTP REST requests. They might have some geolocation, and they do push notifications and payment. And you don't need to write a separate app on each platform to do that. Now, if you're doing some more advanced stuff, then yes, right now at this stage, you're going to have to do a native mobile app. But as Chrome and Safari and Firefox do their updates, they're doing a huge push for web apps. So for example, the Microsoft Store, you can submit any web app to the Microsoft Store and it's free. Or Bing will automatically add it if it crawls your web app and finds your manifest.json file. You only have, so let's talk about cost, for example. That's the biggest pro for doing a progressive web app versus doing a mobile app. So when you do a progressive web app, the cost is only the cost of writing a website or a web app, because all you have to do is add this manifest.json file, and you need to add one service worker file. It's not that difficult. So if it costs you $2,000, and that's it. Whereas if you need to write an app for Android and iOS, you can either go the hybrid route, which is essentially just going to be redoing the work that you could have already done on the website. Or you can do a separate native Android, then a separate native iOS. You have to hire 2 separate developers, and it's probably going to cost you in the tens of thousands versus a couple of thousand. So in order to mitigate those costs, I think the best course of action is to do a progressive web app. So that's the number one cost. Any business that can afford a website can afford a PWA. And if you are focused mostly on the Android community, like me for myself, then writing a PWA 9 times out of 10 is just as effective, and in some cases even more effective than doing a native mobile app. So now I said Android, let's go back to what I was saying about the web APK. So Google is very bullish on progressive web apps. So they actually put out a standard for things called a web APK. So if your web app has all the criteria to become a progressive web app, then when you install to the home screen, it actually sends the data over to a remote Chrome server, and it generates a Android APK and actually installs your web app as a native app. It comes with intent filters for the URI schema, and you can see it on the taskbar. It has its own resources. You can manage it in the settings. It's really awesome, and that's what I was showing you with some of my apps on here. So like I said, you have access to Bluetooth, you have access to NFC, you have access to the camera, the microphone. It's really vast for Android. But here's the real kicker that no one talks about. The secret that's going to take progressive web apps, that's going to make it replace native mobile apps, is WebAssembly. Because with WebAssembly, and for those of you who do not know what WebAssembly is, let me do a quick primer. WebAssembly is a new standard, a new module for JavaScript, where you can actually write C++ modules and compile the C++ binary code to and compile it in the. You can take the bytecode, compile it in the browser, and it's downloaded with the client. So people have rewritten game engines. People have rewritten visualization engines. WebGL, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is a product of WebAssembly. So it's possible for a couple things. It's possible for you to now write new languages for the web using WebAssembly, and it's possible for you to implement things such as multi-threading. It's possible for you to do things to write modules for things like the thumbprint scanner, or modules for the retina scanner. Because if you're doing it on the C++ level, you know, it's possible to do that. So in the future, as WebAssembly grows, you're going to see the capabilities of web apps grow. And soon you're going to be able to see apps that are doing background geolocation, apps that are doing working with fingerprint and retina scanner, background multi-threaded processes, true multi-threaded processes, telephony, reading device info. We're going to be able to see that. So the value of web developers is going up, while the value of mobile developers is plateauing and will eventually go down. And for web developers, this is a really good thing because, you know, like I said, you're going to see your value go up. You're going to be able to charge a lot more per hour and be able to make a lot more money. But it also is going to come at the expense of you're going to have to stay on top of your game. You're going to have to be doing a lot of learning to make sure that you're staying up with all these new WebAssembly modules that are coming out. Make sure that you're doing this, that, and the other. And also, until all of the major players, Microsoft, I mean, really it's Apple that's lagging. And because Apple is such a important demographic, that's really hindering the web app movement, progressive web app movement as a whole, because they see it hostile to their app environment because, you know, it's for free. They don't get their $99 a year out of you, and then they don't get your 33% of in-app revenue. But, you know, so my guess is they're going to squeeze that as much as they can until they find an efficient way to offer their iOS plugins or whatnot. You have to do it that way. But in any case, until Apple gets up to par with everyone else, we're still going to see mobile apps, especially for iOS, reign king. There's already a big movement in Android. There's already a big movement in Android to move to progressive web apps, and that's a big concern. A big thing that's driving that is the need and concern for privacy, because you cannot do a lot of these background. The same limitations of the web is also simultaneously promoting the web. Because there's certain stuff you can't do right now, like read people's emails and stuff in the background while they're using the app. A lot of people are choose to use the web apps, and this goes for stuff like Twitter. So the Twitter web app, it uses less data than the native mobile app because it's not mining all of your stuff in the background. So you can get the same exact experience of Twitter, which, like I said, is what is it? Push notifications. That's the main thing, that real-time aspect that makes Twitter what it is. So, you know, on your timeline, you can use WebSockets or WebPush or WebRTC or whatever for real interaction with the timeline, and you got the push notifications. That's it. You don't really need a mobile app for that. What else? So I think that's pretty much it on the progressive web app side. So those who are jumping on it now are really going to they're going to, what's the word I'm looking for? First movers advantage. They're going to have first movers advantage because when it gets to the point where it's like, okay, web apps are 100% on par or better than mobile apps, these people who already put out their web apps are going to be ahead of the game. So I implore you, if you are a startup and you're a startup with no capital, but you know you're a programmer or whatnot, focus on the web app. Focus on the web app, because another thing is that your native mobile app is going to depend on the back end to get its data. So you're going to have to do the web app anyway. I mean, yeah, you can make your app completely third party using Firebase and this, that, and the third, but you know, at some point you're going to have to build a back end. So it just makes sense to go ahead and just do it like that, in my honest opinion. Now let's move on to native mobile apps. So native mobile apps are obviously the apps that you download on your device. Now the cool thing with native mobile apps is that they're much faster, they're sexier, they're smoother, better transitions. You get better hardware performance. At this point, there's nothing that you can do on the web that you can't do performance-wise better on a native mobile app. And also, depending on what your functionality is, if you require things like background geolocation, background Bluetooth beaconing, background this, that, and the third, then you are going to need to have a native mobile app that can implement that functionality. And even if you make a hybrid app using Cordova or Ionic or whatnot, the stuff that requires the back end or the background functionality, they end up using hooks to tie the Java or the Objective-C or Swift code in. So it's still all boils down to anything background related, you're going to have to do it native. But think long and hard about when you're designing your app, do you need that functionality? Because if you don't, in my honest opinion, it's much better to do the web app, get the product out, you can still make money, and then when you have the money coming in, you can dedicate that money to building out the native app. Now, everyone doesn't do it that way. Obviously, that's just my 2 cents. But, I mean, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. What do you think? Do you think that I'm full of crock? Or do you think that I have a point? Anyway, I was asked this question by one of my followers. And, well, more than one. A few of my followers. So I decided to just do a short video on it. So, 2018, the Jerome Parker opinion, progressive web apps over mobile apps. Write the PWA first, get the product out there, and especially if you are targeting Android users, put the PWA out, because it depending on what the functionality is going to be the same thing anyway. Let me give you an example. Let me give you an example of a. Let me give you 2 examples. One of an app that can be done that would be better served as a PWA, and one app that would be better served as a native mobile app. All right. Right now. So a PWA, if you want to write a music player, don't write it in Android or iOS. Just write it as a web app, because you can do background music playing. You can pause it. You know, if you have a smart watch, it'll show up. The controls will show up on your watch and whatnot. That'll only take you a few lines in JavaScript, and you have it on web, iOS, and Android instantly. Whereas if you had to do it in Android, the same amount of code, it's going to be a lot more. I mean, it's just going to be more difficult for no added benefit. So an example of an app that would make better sense right now would be if you need to write an app that does anything with VR, heavy VR. You know, there's some JavaScript. JavaScript has a VR implementation that's going to be stable, I think, next release in Chrome and in Firefox, I believe. So, I mean, yeah, you're going to be able to do stuff with VR. But right now, you know, it's better just to do that with native. Or if you wanted to do something with like Bluetooth beacons that needed to be in the background at all times, then you need to do a native Android and iOS app. But before I get off here, I just want to give an apology to everyone who's pre-ordered the book. We had some copyright issues with some of our images. I thought I could use it for personal and commercial. Turns out I could only use them for personal. We haven't found replacement ones yet. So I'm going to do a recording. Well, I have a lot of the recordings, but I'm going to polish them up and whatnot. It's recordings of each chapter of the book, video of me, the visual representation to the text. And I'm going to give that out to everyone. I'm going to give that out to everyone who pre-ordered the book. And then when we get the image issue underway, you'll receive the text. But that way you'll still, and links to the code, so you guys can get something. And I'm truly sorry for the delay. But tomorrow I'm going to be doing some live coding with the Stripe API, working with products. If you haven't been to my website, it's jeromeparker.com. Please subscribe, to this channel, like this video, tap that bell. And if you aren't following me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all my social media is at MasterShake08, except for my Facebook, it's just Jerome Parker. So hit me up. Until then, guys, peace.